So I study a lot of business people. Anytime I see someone that I think successful who's doing it right, I just want to meet them. I want to talk to them. I want to ask them questions. I've read most everything there is to read about John D. Rockefeller. I've spoke about him. I did a complete podcast on him. I'll put it up here. But I am fascinated by what people did, how they did it, how they thought, and how they just had the tenacity to pursue their dreams and make things happen. So this episode, I was actually thinking about, I was reading about, and I want to say this, I don't agree with everything these guys did, okay? That's besides the point. What I do is I take away nuggets that help me do what I do and help me think differently, okay? So I call these guys the top three. Unfortunately, one of them's no longer with us, but I talk about today Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, and Bill Gates. So here's what I thought about. What were the first 5 years like? Okay? And they're going to teach us about building something great. Let me just say this. None of these guys, to the best of my knowledge, were given a lot of money and say, go start a business. And none of them really had a silver spoon in their mouth. I mean, it was a lot of hard work, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Hey, this is Greg McAfee, and welcome to the Greg McAfee Show. Now let's get started. Hey, welcome back to the Greg McAfee Show, where we discuss the nuts and the bolts of business, leadership, and life. Without all the fluff, without the political correctness, nonsense, just truth, grit, and inspiration for those of you who are building something and want to continue to grow it, scale it bigger than you can possibly imagine. Then this show is for you. Because today we're diving into some iconic entrepreneurs. Like I said, you got Jeff Bezos, you got Steve Jobs, who's no longer with us, but we can learn a lot from him. I've read his book or books, and Bill Gates. And they were all high achievers, go-getters. But here's a spoiler alert here. None of them were glamorous. The way they started, it wasn't anything glamorous. It wasn't easy. And none of them started, like I said, with a silver spoon. None of them started with perfect timing or a 30-page business plan, which a lot of people will tell you need. I didn't even start writing a business plan probably till, I don't know, my 10th to 15th year. And the reason I did is because I wanted to learn how to do it. And I met a friend of mine who had actually written a business plan when he worked for Huffy Bicycles. And I thought, man, if I could put a business plan together with his help for my company, that would be pretty cool. So we did. And it was a really neat plan. But I got to the 15th year or so without that business plan. Let's say that. So they struggled. These guys struggled. They failed. People laughed at them. People said, you'll never make it. Sound familiar? Well, it should. I know it sounds familiar for me because every entrepreneur who builds something worth building walks down that same road. If you started like these guys, you know what it's like. If you bought a business and went through what these guys went through, then you know what it's like. And if you're thinking about starting a business, you're going to learn what it's like. Okay? So today we're going to talk about not as much about how much they started with, but how many times they failed. And whether they almost went under. We're going to talk a little bit about all the doubters and the ones who told them this will never work. And most importantly, what you can learn from them their first 5 years. So we're going to start with Jeff Bezos and Amazon Scrappy. See, Jeff didn't start Amazon with $1 trillion empire that we know of today. He started in a garage, like I did, like a lot of you did. I actually started at a kitchen table and worked my way into a garage. With a door laid across 2 sawhorses for his first desk. Think about that. I've seen nicer desks in our warehouse than that. And Jeff left a cushy job. He did have a really good job. I don't want to say cushy, but he had a really good high-paying job. But he read some statistics that about the internet growing 2,300% per year, and that got his attention. It triggered something. He thought, if I don't try this, I will regret this the rest of my life. So he jumped out with a leap of faith. He scrapped together, mostly from his parents, who invested about $245,573. Not millions, although today that investment gives them about 6% of Amazon, which is worth about $30 billion or so. Puts them in one of the wealthiest families in America. He didn't get any venture capital, just family believing in him, because he also asked his siblings if they would help. And some of them pitched in $10,000 or so, which makes them worth over $1 billion today. So what did he start with? What did he start selling? He started books. Started with books. Now, back then, guys, people were saying, who would buy books on the internet when I can just go down to the bookstore? And he also said there's a vast selection of books. That's what he was thinking. And he also knew they probably would be easier to ship because about the same size box for many of the books. So he was thinking ahead. But people laughed. The analysts laughed. And bookstores laughed at him. They're not laughing today. He's put a lot of them out of business because they don't know how to compete. We've talked about that before on my podcast, not knowing how to compete. And it reminds me of when I started McAfee Heating and Air back in 1990 with one truck, and people thought I was crazy. I didn't have enough experience in heating and air. I didn't have any business experience. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any name recognition. But it was just a little heating and air company compared to these guys, what they started. But it was still a company, and it did us well. It provided for our family, and our philanthropy has always been very strong. I always say, don't wait and start philanthropy later in life. Start it today. Start helping people today. But anyway, crazy is a compliment, by the way. When someone says you're crazy, yeah, that's a compliment for an entrepreneur. Amazon made a lot of rookie mistakes. Jeff Bezos will tell you today he made a lot of mistakes. He overstocked items, which he had a hard time getting rid of. He lost a lot of money doing that. He failed projects like Amazon auction, so he would take all those overstocked books and try to auction them off. It failed. It was operational chaos that nearly broke the company back then. And Bezos even told early investors, he even told his mom and dad, he said, look, you give me this money, there's a 70% chance you're not going to get it back. We're going to lose it. So he had a 30% chance in his mind that this was going to make it because it had never been done before. So I'll give him kudos because we talk about you got to have big dreams. You got to think big. Well, he was 30% big because this had never been done before. what I wonder, I should have looked this up, but what did the Wright brothers, what percentage did they have in their mind that they could fly? Probably less than 30. But they kept trying, and they were first to flight. I'm proud of that. I'm in Dayton, Ohio, and that's what we're all about here is first to flight. So he warned them. He warned all his investors at the beginning. There's a 70% chance you're not going to get your money back. Now, how would that go today? They had faith in this guy, and his parents had faith in him. Just do it, Jeff. Show us you can do it. They had no idea they would be multi-billionaires one day. They just had faith in their son to make this business work and get their return, get a return on the investment, right? So there were many times, first 5 years, that the dot-com crash nearly wiped out Amazon. Cash got tight. They laid people off. They closed centers. People forgot this part. They only see the success. And I said that about my little heating and air conditioning company, that people would come in to this beautiful 30,000 square foot facility that was remodeled and designed like a medical facility. It was that clean. It was that organized. It was that structured, but that's all they seen. They had no idea I started off at a kitchen table. They had no idea that I worked out of a garage for almost 6.5 years. They had no idea all the heartache and pain and tears I went through to get to that spot that they walked into right there. That's all they see. Well, that's all we see today is Amazon. It's huge. $1 trillion business. People forget, or they don't know. They don't find out. I like to research. I like to find out, like I said, how people get started. So here's a few lessons from Jeff Bezos. Start before you're ready. I love this. He didn't wait for all the stars to align. And he saw opportunity and he moved on it. Matter of fact, he has a 70% rule. Once he gathers, he's on this 70% thing. Once he gathers 70% of the facts, he's ready to make a decision. He feels that the other 30% is probably going to waste too much time anyway, so let's go for it. Let's base everything off that 70%. If it looks good, let's go. When you research and overanalyze, you're going to worry about the other 30%, and you're not going to make a good decision. You're going to waste time, and probably someone's going to jump in and do what you should have done earlier, okay? So I love that. And he also says you will make mistakes, just learn fast. Make them fast and learn fast. Speed created Amazon's advantage. And number 3, ignore the critics. It's your idea. If your idea is big enough, someone's going to tell you it won't work. I love that. If your idea is big enough, somebody or a lot of people will tell you it's not going to work. All right. And then we'll move into Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started Apple in a garage too. There's just something about starting in a garage, and it's the birthplace of dreams, and there's a lot of noise complaints from neighbors, and that's the truth because I did have a neighbor that called the police many times, and we were almost in an industrial area. It was a residential area planted in a commercial industrial area. But anyway, here's how they started. To fund Apple, they didn't have any parents give them money like Jeff did. Steve sold his Volkswagen for somewhere around $1,400 and his Volkswagen van. And Wozniak sold his Hewlett-Packard calculator for somewhere around $600, which gave them about $2,000 to start fund, a kickstart. And now that's sacrifice. That's commitment. You'll rarely see that today because everybody's worrying about finding an investor, finding someone to put up the cash. But nobody wants to sell their own stuff to get started. See, when you do that, you're sacrificing everything. You're putting skin in the game. You're going after it. And I did just that. I never borrowed one dime from anyone. I raised my own money and raised my own money, meaning I went out and did a job, and the profit I raised, And I gradually grew. It was a very slow growth, but nobody wants to grow slow today. Everybody thinks it's a race. Success is not a race. It's a journey, and it can be an extremely slow journey. That does not mean it's not succeeding. Success will come later. Take your time, grow. It's healthy growth. It will sustain you through, for me, 35 years. And but here's some early challenges they faced. The Apple I computer, their first computer, was not very impressive. And hobbyists bought it, and that's about it. Banks told them no. Investors told them no. And friends said no. They said, I don't want to lose my money. And finally, one man, Mike Markula, he seen something in Steve. Said, this guy's crazy. And he invested $250,000, which brought them or bought them credibility. And they had a breakthrough moment. In 1977, they released the Apple II, and it changed everything. You see, it was user-friendly, it looked cool, and it worked. And sales exploded. People suddenly acted like they always believed in Apple. It's amazing once you get going and you're successful that everybody's behind you. But you can't get anyone behind you until then. Isn't that funny? And then it's funny how success changes people's memories. Let's put it that way. All right, here's some lessons from Steve. Sacrifice comes before success. I love this. If you won't give up something, don't expect anything big. And number 2, your first idea won't be the winning idea. Keep thinking. Apple I wasn't great. Wasn't even good. Apple II was the breakthrough. If they would have stopped after Apple I, we wouldn't have Apple today. And number 3, he said people will doubt what they don't understand. Very similar to what Jeff said. Steve Jobs was selling a computer for regular people. And people didn't believe that market existed. Imagine that. All right, then we go to Bill Gates. From failure to Microsoft, because Bill Gates and Paul Allen, rest his soul, founded Microsoft in 1975, but not before failing with their first venture called Trough-O-Data. Now, Trough-O-Data was supposed to analyze traffic patterns, but it was a flop, and it flopped. And technically impressive, but had no market. Nobody wanted it. You got to have a sale before anything happens, right? And it was sound familiar in our industry. I mean, you got to have something people want. There's been a lot of flops that came out. I did heating and air for 35 years. I watched a lot of things come out that just didn't take off. So just because you can build it doesn't mean people will buy it. Their first breakthrough was writing the basic interpreter for the Altair 8800. That gave them credibility and a customer base. Then, a few years later, they landed one of the biggest deals in history because IBM was not thinking when they did this. They couldn't have been. IBM asked them to build the operating system for the IBM personal computer. And Bill Gates said something like, well, I own the software. And IBM said something like, well, that's fine. We don't want to own the software. We just want to own the computer. Oh, you know how that went. Pretty cool. So the contract turned Microsoft into a global force instantly. Now, here's the challenges that they had. No one believed software would matter. It's just software. You can own it. And good, because every time we do an upgrade, we get paid. Think about that. Hardware was the king back then. Software was an afterthought. Gates had to prove that the code was as important as the computer itself to be able to sell it. And they were competing in an industry dominated by giants, and they didn't have any money. And here's a couple lessons from Bill Gates. Your first business might fail. Good. Learn from it, move on, and succeed. Because Trough O'Data prepared them for Microsoft. They learned a lot from their failure, which we talk about often on this show. And number 2, be ready when the opportunity comes. They were small, but prepared. When IBM knocked, they answered the door and made one of the biggest sales, like I said, in history. And number 3, don't let the market define your value. Gates pushed software when no one thought it mattered until it did. Now think about that. Again, with my little heating and air conditioning company in 2003, we came out with the McAfee system, and everybody said that will not work. How can you compete with the big name brands? My philosophy was I'm going to brand the McAfee better than they do, and we did. And we were in the top 3 of national brands in Dayton, Ohio market. So we sold a lot of McAfee systems. It was huge. The McAfee label was on the unit. If you bought a house and it had a McAfee system, who are you going to call? No brainer. Okay. Now, let's end this with this thought. Here's the truth about these 3 pioneers, because that's exactly what they were. Bezos, Jobs, and Gates. They didn't start with big money. They didn't start with a big team. They did start with a big dream. They didn't start with perfect conditions, though. And they didn't even start with certainty. There's a 70% chance if you invest in me, you're going to lose. They all faced doubt. They all faced major setbacks. And they all faced critics who told them they were crazy. Good. If no one thinks you're crazy, your dreams are probably too small. It's like I say often. If your goals aren't crazy, they're probably too small. If nobody thinks you're crazy, your dreams are too small. All right? Now here's some takeaways. If you're building something today, number 1, write this down. Expect resistance. Again, if you're not getting resistance, you're doing something wrong. You will get resistance. Now, here's what I've learned from resistance the hard way, because I didn't always do it this way. When you get resistance, just shut up. Smile, look at them, and kind of nod. It's hard to do, but you can train yourself to do this. It's a trained thing. It's a habit. Expect resistance. Number 1, expect failure. Number 2, again, they all expected to fail. They didn't quite understand how they were going to do this. They just knew they wanted to do this. And they worked through many obstacles to do it. Number 3, they expect doubt from people. Just expect doubt. Expect resistance. Expect failure, and expect doubt. You won't be disappointed. And then, very, very important, which I talk about often on this show, you can't start a business and work 40 hours a week. I don't care how good you are. And these guys who teach how to run businesses and work 3 days a week and all this crap, guaranteed these guys didn't. Guaranteed these guys didn't, okay? And I'd rather follow these guys than some consultant telling me how to work less and achieve more. Bullcrap. All right. Expect long hours. I'm not going to tell you what long hours is. But someone said the other day to me, I'm purchasing something and I'm not telling many people about it. And somebody said, you deserve that. Well, I thank them for saying that, but honestly, I've said this before, I don't deserve anything. Now, if you say you earned that, and if you say you and your wife earned that, first thing I say is absolutely. She dealt with me working 12, 15, 20 hours a day. She dealt with it for many years. That's what it took. She had the vision to know he has to do this for it to work and for us to be able to do what we're doing today. And she hung in there with me, and she never complained. She never complained to our kids, and it was a really, really good partnership because I like to work, and she had faith in me that this was going to work, but she knew I had to do these things in order for it to work. Thank you, Naomi. All right? And then expect sacrifices. You just have to sacrifice. I did a whole podcast on this. Do you give up time for your family or do you give up time for your business? I made things happen for my family. I managed my time well. I made things happen. But I can tell you this, if I gave up too much time for my family, I could lose my family. If I gave up too much time for my business, I will lose my business. And there is a certain amount of time you have to implement and invest in your business, and there's a certain amount of time you have to invest in your family. And I'll leave it at that. So here's this. If you're building something today, expect resistance, expect failure, expect doubt, expect long hours, no way around it, and expect sacrifices. But also expect this. If you stay focused and you adapt and you outwork everyone else and you take care of your customers better than anyone else, your first 5 years can build a foundation that is extremely extraordinary. And I must say, I think I achieved that. And I'm not bragging. I'm just giving you the facts. I had a plan. I learned from people smarter than me. I worked hard. I worked smart most of the time. And I read everything there is to read. And it was extraordinary. So Jeff Bezos started in a garage. Steve Jobs started in a garage. Bill Gates started in a tiny office after a failed company. I started with one truck and a dream. Maybe you started with even less. And that's okay. Remember this. Everything big started small. You might be very, very small. You might be small. You might be medium size. Or you might be a huge company. And you might have taken it over from dad or grandpa. But you've got to keep it going. And you've got to make it work today. You can't be doing what they did 20, 40 years ago and expect everything to work today because everything changes and business changes. Okay? Thanks for listening. Hit that like button. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you started with. We'd love to hear it. As always, carry on. God bless. Make this day the best day of your life because we're not promised tomorrow. I'll see you later.